In this day and age, it's not uncommon for people to use Uber. Most people use the app because it's cheaper than driving, but when Oscar spotted the car, he could tell something was wrong. He could tell from the woman's expression that she wasn't feeling well. She looked distressed as she sat in the back seat. Oscar only grew more suspicious when his friend John agreed that the woman seemed distressed. As they stared at her, both men, Seven's jaws dropped as she spoke two words to them. They wasted no time in calling 911. Oscar and John had been close for as long as they could remember. They were inseparable and did everything together. The boys were excited when John finally got his driver's license, which meant he could pick up Oscar whenever they wanted to hang out. Whenever they rode in his car, they played their CDs on the radio, laughed, and had a good time. They experienced true freedom for the first time. But one day they stopped at a red light, and it changed their lives forever. John Moore was an average high school graduate. But unlike the teenagers around him, he never thought too much about the future. Determined to make the most of his young age, he took every opportunity to date his best friend. Together, they made sure to enjoy every aspect of their lives. They loved to ride together, but one day they stumbled upon a strange sight. This would teach them to trust their impulses. Oscar Davis shared John's mindset, and that's why they were best friends. All he ever craved was his after-school outings with John. On these trips, they would go to the public pool, the arcade, or even the grocery store to stock up on their favorite snacks. They were 17 and in their element. But little did they know that sooner or later they would run into trouble. The day started like any other. The two boys woke up and got ready for school. That day, they had extracurricular activities in which they had to participate. On days like this, they didn't leave school until 5 a.m. The day dragged on as usual, but their last class of the day was Spanish, and they couldn't wait to get in John's car and drive off. They never expected to see a pretty girl, and they certainly didn't think anything would go wrong. Her long school day had finally come to an end. As soon as the bell rang, John and Oscar happily made their way to John's car. They got into his car and made their way to John's house, where they were prepared to play video games and relax until evening came. John wouldn't take Oscar home until the sun was down. But until then, they would be playing their favorite video games. But little did they know they wouldn't even make it home. They had been out for about 15 minutes. They had taken the quickest route home, which meant they would be traveling on a lot of main roads. They expected the roads to be busy, but this was not the case. They were halfway to John's house when they stopped at a red light. This is when something caught her attention. Only one other car stopped with them at the red light. At first, none of them thought much about it. It was just an ordinary car. How often do you really look at the people who stop next to you at red lights? But for some reason, Oscar decided to check out the car next to them. He immediately noticed something very strange. He would be forever grateful that he looked over when he did. His eyes immediately fell on the young woman sitting in the back of the car. He immediately noticed how beautiful she was, a smile spreading across his face. But soon after, he realized something was wrong. The girl didn't smile back. On the contrary, she was visibly distraught. Oscar watched her lips move. She tried to mouth something to him. His blood ran cold as he stared at her. He quickly turned to John and told him what he saw. John quickly glanced over and looked at the young woman. He also remarked on how beautiful she was, but then he saw the same as Oscar. She was definitely not happy or content. But what was going on? Did the driver drive badly? She was in the back seat, so they both assumed she was taking an Uber somewhere. But they had to act when they realized what she was saying to them with her lips. It wasn't uncommon these days for people to take an Uber home. Many people thought it was cheaper than driving. But Oscar felt something was wrong with that car. The woman in the back seat didn't seem comfortable. In fact, she looked desperate. Oscar's suspicions only grew worse when his friend John agreed. But the moment she mouthed two words to them, they knew they had to call 911. The words the woman spoke to them were, "Help me." That was the moment they knew to call 911. Oscar reached a 911 attendant just as the light went green. They decided to follow the car. The girl stared at her out the back window. Now they were sure that it was on purpose and that she needed help. That wasn't Uber, it was something much worse. Oscar managed to lead the police to where they were. They just hoped they would get there soon enough. Their precious minutes were running out, and they had no idea what the driver was capable of. After following the car for 20 minutes, it hit a police spike strip and crashed. Oscar's and John's hearts sank. But they had no idea what would happen. Just as Oscar and John were getting out of the car, the police surrounded the accident and got the driver out. They handcuffed him and examined the woman, who was miraculously unharmed. After being checked, she ran over to the two teenagers. She hugged them and thanked them for saving her. It was something she would remember forever. But John and Oscar didn't do it for the recognition. Everything ended for the best. The young woman's name turned out to be Holly, and she had been kidnapped by the man in her own car. Fortunately, the man faces serious kidnapping charges and a severe sentence. Holly's mother thanked her rescuers, and it was a happy ending for everyone, even though Holly had to buy a new car. To protect the privacy of those depicted, some names, locations, and identifiers have been changed and are the product of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to actual events or places, or persons living or dead, is purely coincidental.